Newsfeed, rape-accused 22-year-old Nicholas Ninow has pleaded guilty to all charges in the High Court in Pretoria today. He had been facing charges, in fact he is facing charges of rape, possession of an illegal substance, defeating the administration of justice and assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Two witnesses testified today describing their version of events. Both witnesses claim Nino was drunk and high on drugs. I'm joined in studio by Vincentia Dlamini, who is from Women and Men Against Child Abuse, and there she is Operations Director. And this is a bit of a complicated case because the man has pleaded guilty, Nicholas Ninow, but the prosecution continues. It has not led to the conclusion of the case, and that's partly because the National Prosecuting Authority, Vincentia, is not accepting his guilty plea. They want to see this to completion and basically pursue the case to its logical conclusion. So that's why it differs from other cases where you have a guilty plea entered and that's the end of the trial. Are we to take courage in an NPA that in this particular case insists that actually what you have said doesn't tally with what we've heard from other people we've interviewed about this case, and therefore your guilty plea is not accepted, and one imagines that at the end of it they might likely be calling for a harsh sentence if he is found guilty? Are we to take courage that there's light at the end of the tunnel in as far as the criminal justice system?
I think these are the conversations that I've been having with people saying, he's pleaded guilty, what does it mean? Does it mean that he's just going to get a lenient sentence? Is he showing remorse? So, and we know that during trial, we are going into sentencing procedures, right? And then when we go to sentencing procedures, there's going to be aggravation of sentence and mitigation of sentence. And I think with him, he's just tried to be very smart and say, okay, fine, I will plead guilty, and then I will, in mitigation, I would say, I'm remorseful, I'm sorry about this, So I think we need to support the NPA in its quest to actually see him, go through the trial and actually having, their ducks in a row and going after him and calling for harsher sentences. And us as Women and Men Against Child Abuse support that motion of harsher sentences, that is life sentence without parole.
And that's partly what the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, was talking about in his speech to the nation, the harsher sentences for people who abuse women. I don't think he mentioned children as well in there, but I mean, we know the scourge that we face as a country, that it affects both women and children at the hands of men. In terms of the importance of having a functional NPA that understands the complexities of cases such as these, how important is that? And are you encouraged by some of the words that have been spoken by some in leadership, including the President?
We've had a lot of promises before, and I think we will believe it when it happens, because we've had speeches during our Child Protection Week, our 16 days of action. In the past years, we've been told that they're going to, make budget available, the sentences need to be harsh. We will believe it when we see it. But what we are saying is that as an organization, this Nino case needs to be a landmark in how the NPA and, SAPS handle cases of child abuse, because I'm wondering how many of our cases are going to get the same attention as the Nino case has gotten, because he was arrested, everything was done quickly, he was sent for psychiatric evaluation, and everything was done, it was very effective. But my question is, are we getting the same attention to a case in Maduba somewhere? Are we getting the same case where there is no media presence? And yes, it's good that we are putting pressure as organizations, the media is there, but we want all cases of rape, child murder, all abuse cases to be handled in such a manner, not to have pressure from, organizations like ourselves, media reporting on these cases. We want the same attention to be filtered down to people, the person who was at Pretoria Court today, the person who was at court today whose case is not in the media. We want the same attention.
And is it your sense and your experience in the work that you do that this doesn't always happen in many of the far-flung areas where, you know, the trial will be going on without, you know, the media present and without the pressure that you talk about of organizations such as yourself?
Unfortunately, that is the reality of a lot of cases, that it takes, you know, organizations like ourselves to actually push and ask for questions and push the prosecution, push subs to open cases, you know, to make noise, to write letters to the president, to write letters to ministers, to picket outside court, to have media, to have press releases sent out to media houses to say this is what we want. And that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case. It should be by default that every case is going to be taken as serious as is. We have a high rate of, you know, femicide, child rape, murder. We're just in a state of crisis, and we've been saying this for years.
Yeah.
We have not been quiet. We have not been quiet. We've always been talking.
What is your sense of the capacity to investigate crimes against children? Some of them being sexual violence crimes against children in the country. We have a unit in the SAPS, but how much capacity does it have by way of understanding the complexities that are involved when you're dealing with a child victim, and also ensuring that this child victim is assisted throughout the criminal justice system, which, you know, a child is not usually ready for to deal with and confront?
Okay, you would look at the FCS officers that are going to be your investigating officers to say what we would like to see. I think in other areas, especially in the urban areas, it's much easier. The accessibility of FCS officers, you know, you'll get them on standby, they will come, depending also on the relationships that you have in areas where nobody cares about victims. There are no organizations that are going to put pressure. Nobody is going to be taken to task. You would find that cases are going to not going to be open. If they are going to be opened, no communications with clients, and sometimes there's no cars. You know, a client is just going to wait. The resources need to be made available to all victims of gender-based violence.
Sure. And when you say relationships you have, are you talking about calling in on people that you know work
people that you
in
trust.
A particular region and say, please attend to this?
Yes, if I know exactly, if I call this particular officer, it shouldn't be that way. So we really rely on having the good ones on our side to say, so and so, what is happening? What is happening in your unit? A case has not been open. You know, it also speaks to having to get, you know, places where you're, you know, getting the right prosecutors. We've got fantastic prosecutors, but how many of those prosecutors are actually going to take you serious, are going to communicate with clients, are going to ensure that the victim statements are going to put pressure on the investigating officer to go and look at the best interest, to take the child for therapy, the child who does not want to speak because they're still traumatized, instead of withdrawing the case because the child cannot speak, to take the child to a forensic assessment so that you can actually get a proper assessment done, except for a prosecutor that is going to accept that, okay, the child cannot speak, and just allow the defense to actually, you know, withdraw the case because they don't.
It sounds to me like a case of professionalizing and then resourcing even more these units.
Exactly. And also that you can pump in as much money into services, but are the people that are there, do they want to do the kind of job that they're doing? Are the doctors that are taking evidence from our victims wanting to take that evidence? Are the forensic nurses that are put there want to do that? Are the FCS members wanting to do that? Are their superiors going to take them into account? Should they be found not to be, you know, are we going to protect people that are not going to do their jobs? Are we going to make rape kits available to our victims? Are we going to make our court user-friendly, that our victims are not going to be secondary victimized? Are we going to make our, you know, our frontline officers going to be sensitive and not ask you questions? Are we going to have the judiciary being sensitized in not passing ridiculous sentences? You know, It is our state.
So it sounds to me then that when we talk about what government can do, what we each can do, it doesn't sound like we're talking pie in the sky stuff. I mean, in this conversation, you've been able to pinpoint what are some of the key interventions that would make a difference. But anyway, let me quickly squeeze in this issue around the man accused of killing Uyinene Mkhwetyana. He is a post office employee, and it seems that the post office had gotten it flagged for them that actually he had a conviction, a prior conviction, and I think they're saying it's for car hijacking. But it seems there was no action. It never really reached a point at which the question was then asked to say, do we want to have a person, he was one of 178, if I'm not mistaken, who were found to have these convictions out of 300 files. What do you make of all of that, the responsibility of people that are in spaces where, in South Africa, I mean, as Uyinene's mother said at the funeral, it's hard to say, whether you want a person to say your life may be in danger there. None of us would have thought that the post office would be a dangerous space. But what can we take from this?
It tells you the amount of disregard for the safety of citizens generally when an institution as big as the post office is told that in your midst you have this criminal and you overlook that. And it tells you about spaces where women and children are at, schools. Are all teachers screened? Police officers, we got shocking stats of how many officers have got their, rape cases. It tells you that the correctional services, I believe they are not swabbing the inmates, because according to the law, it says that everybody that has been arrested needs to be swabbed because we have cases where we need to link people to the DNA, but we are not doing that. So what's the point of having a database that is not functional in our country? So we are going to have this nice legislation and protocols and policies, but people that need to implement and account for that, they're not doing it. So we are a lawlessness country.
Sure, Vincentia, thank you so much. And that sobering thought, that's Vincentia Dlamini, who is Operations Director at the Women and Men Against Child Abuse, reflecting on some of the key developments that we have seen in the last few days, last few weeks.